So lately, I've been trying to work through an extensive gaming backlog, and for many years now, I've heard all about how great the Soulsborne games are by From Software. Last year, I started this journey by playing Sekiro, and I absolutely loved it, and I wound up beating it 5 times and getting the Platinum Trophy. I played it out of order because I'd heard that it was the least like the others in the series, which so far seems to be true. Then, a couple weeks ago, I finally started on the actual Souls games, starting with the game that birthed the genre, Demon's Souls. And to my great disappointment, I was very underwhelmed. I found the game extremely boring and tedious. It was not difficult like a lot of people claim the Souls games are, it was just not a very good game in my opinion. Very unfun and obnoxious. I first tried over half the bosses in the game, and outside of Flame Lurker, no boss took me more than a handful of attempts. People think that criticism against the game just means you need to get good. But the truth is, I just don't think it's a very good game. That doesn't mean I suck at it. Go watch my review if you want more in-depth reasoning, but all this is to say that after playing Dark Souls 1, I now am doubling down on the fact that Demon's Souls is just not a fun game, because I am delighted to report that Dark Souls 1 is absolutely awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game, and in this video I will break down all the reasons that I love it so much and contrast some of that with what they improved from Demon's Souls to make this game so much better than its predecessor. And if you like gaming reviews like this, then consider subscribing to the channel, where I review all the games that I play. I'll be streaming Dark Souls 2 next on Twitch at Estus7, so come by and say hey. I streamed my entire playthrough of Dark Souls, and it was a very fun time. Something that I should get out of the way right off the bat is that I played Dark Souls mostly blind. I don't follow guides, though a couple times I did go to YouTube to look stuff up. I played the remastered version on PC, and this includes the DLC. So one thing I had to look up was how to even access the DLC, and then how to fight Black Dragon Calamite, because I was annoyed to just go down to where he was and get killed over and over by his flame attack. Turns out I needed to talk to the giant knight to get him to shoot the dragon down, and then I was able to fight it. I also got infected by an egghead parasite, so my head turned into an infected parasite, but one of my chatters told me to use egg vermifuge to cure it. Additionally, I had a tip on how to get a really strong ring early in the game, which I wound up using for my whole playthrough. This is just the reality of streaming. I don't have a strict no backseating policy, and I'm fine to accept tips, and I even like playing it this way, as in Sekiro, I was able to complete every hidden boss and hidden secret thanks to my chat's assistance, but I certainly don't go out of the way to spoil the game for myself. I'm a completionist by nature, so I tend to check every nook and cranny of a level that I'm in, so as far as finding hidden rings or items, I was able to do that quite easily. I'm sure I missed some things throughout my playthrough, but in saying that, I got to experience a lot of what the game has to offer, and I thoroughly enjoyed my experience. So let's talk about it. One of my favorite elements in Sekiro was the world design, and how as you explored more of the world, you could open up shortcuts to make traversal much easier and more seamless if you had to come back to the areas later. The way the levels weave back on each other is one of my favorite things about From Software games, and this game does it brilliantly. One prime example is in Sen's Fortress, where you can use the cage to skip pretty much all of the traversal in the level. This is a very welcome addition, as that area is quite tough to navigate thanks to all the enemies and environmental hazards on the way. So your first time through the area is a tough gauntlet to get through, but once you've proven yourself, then you unlock this massive shortcut. But you also need to explore diligently, as you need a key to unlock the cage, and you only find that key by being very thorough. There are countless examples like that in Dark Souls, where the game rewards you greatly for exploring every inch of the map. Down in the catacombs, the run back to Gravelord Nito is long and treacherous, but turns out there are a couple bonfires down here to find. Big shout out to my chatters for telling me to look around more and find it. A big reason I didn't explore the Tomb of the Giants as well as I did all the other areas is because it's pitch black, so it's hard to tell where you've been and where you haven't. But it is nice to get rewarded with bonfires down here for exploring the area. As I said, Dark Souls handsomely rewards you for exploring, and I love that in games. I'm already the type of person who's slightly OCD, so I don't want to miss anything, so the fact that this quality of mine is rewarded in the game makes me very happy. A downside to this, however, is that these games are made to be replayable. I mentioned I platinumed Sekiro. Well, that game has 4 different endings, and I wanted to see them all. Additionally, certain things you do affect the outcome later on. There is a hidden fight with 2 guardian apes that I never would have discovered on my own without help from my chat, because it requires certain triggers and then traversing back to an area that you've already cleared. In a game like God of War, I can fully explore an area, and if I can't get to a certain part, it's usually because I'm lacking some ability, much like a Metroidvania. So you know that you should go back to that place later because it's obvious that you're missing something. In Souls games, this is much less obvious. I'm so thankful for the people who compile wikis for these games so that people can experience all that they have to offer. It's amazing how they figure out what triggers what. One example is early on with the Gold Knight Lautrec. Apparently there's a whole questline involving this dude, but I chose to kill him early on to get his ring. So now I would need to do another playthrough to see his questline. Same thing goes for the Onion Man. I accidentally stabbed him while trying to kill the knights that were taking him hostage. Then he aggroed to me and I wound up having to kill him. So that's another questline that I missed. There are also dialogue choices, and I always wonder what the other outcome is for those. These aren't knocks on the game by any means. I think it's great that they have so many forms of replayability, but as someone who is a perfectionist by nature, I just hate that I can't experience everything the game has to offer on a first playthrough. It sucks to know that I'm missing things. Speaking of secret items, when I beat Black Dragon Calamite, some of my chat was saying I should have went for its tail, as it drops a great weapon. I also got an awesome dragon sword early on from a dragon by shooting its tail with an arrow thanks to a tip from my chat. I think it's so cool that you can get weapons off of enemies. I got a Black Knight sword about halfway through my playthrough, and because I was going with a strength build, that weapon wound up becoming the only weapon I would use for the rest of my playthrough. Early on in the game, I also got a halberd that I liked, and that carried me through a lot of the early game bosses, and also the dragon sword. The weapon variety in this game is honestly crazy. There's so many different types of ways you can play, and when you beat the game, it automatically starts you back in the jail cell, but this time with all your gear from the first playthrough, which is pretty sweet because then you can play with some other weapons that you were curious to use but didn't get a chance to use in your first play session. You're also way overpowered for early game, so it would make repeat playthroughs much quicker, which is nice as then you can experience some of those quest lines that you missed. I played about 2 minutes on New Game Plus after I beat the game, and it was actually hilarious smoking the Asylum Demon in just 4 swings. On top of incredible weapon variety, there's also a ton of spells to learn and upgrade, and a huge variety of items to use, but I barely used any items, and I didn't cast any spells in my first playthrough. I love that they have all this stuff, and it's great that people explain on YouTube what these things do, but personally, I don't really experiment with too many of the items and figure out what they do. But again, all these items and different things being in the game does give it incredible replayability. The enemy variety in this game is incredible. You can fight ghosts, skeletons, mushrooms, giant crystal guys, hydras, snake dudes, giants, rats, dragons, gargoyles, and everything else you can imagine. I was so freaking impressed with the enemy variety in this game. It was fun to learn the optimal way to kill everything, but after your first or second time through an area, sometimes you just want to get back to where you died previously. The runbacks in this game are often quite long, so if you died far from a bonfire, it can take quite a while to get back to where you died. Thankfully, this is where Dark Souls improves the most from Demon Souls. In Demon Souls, the vast majority of runbacks were on skinny walkways where you were forced to take down the enemies impeding your progress. This is fine when you're initially going through an area, as it's fun to delve deeper into a level and take things out along the way. However, when you have to do that over and over again on boss runbacks, it quickly becomes tedious. There is no other option most of the time. The enemies are literally blocking you and you have to take them out. This means you cannot speed up the runback in any way. You're forced to take these enemies out. This was my biggest gripe with Demon Souls. This was not fun or engaging, it was just boring. Obviously, I can take out low-level enemies with ease, but I'm an impatient person and I would rather rely on movement to just get by them. In Dark Souls, there's seldom a time where you must fight an enemy to get past it. The odd time, yes, you're in a tight space and it makes sense to just kill the enemy, as this is the easiest or only way to get by, but the examples are much fewer, and it is usually just in 1 or 2 parts on a runback, not the entire runback. Seath the Scaleless has a pretty lengthy runback, and there are a bunch of annoying enemies right before the boss room. My first time getting here, I spent a few minutes taking them all out. My second time going back to the boss, I ran by all 5 in about 3 seconds. It's fine to make long runbacks, but the game needs to give players agency in how they want to approach said runback. You need skill expression. I was able to do the last judge runback in Silksong in under a minute. Same with a long runback like Girl the Great, even though those were widely hated runbacks. But you can optimize the runback to get better at it, which saves yourself tons of time if you keep dying to the boss. In Demon Souls, this was not an option, and it made me despise the game for it. Again, I'm good enough to take out low tier enemies all day long, but forcing me to do that is not fun or engaging gameplay. It's tiresome and tedious. Thankfully, I never ran into a single situation with a runback that I despise like I did in Demon Souls, and that was such a relief. It made me enjoy the game so much more. I took 40 hours to beat Demon Souls and Dark Souls, yet Demon Souls only has 16 bosses, where Dark Souls, including the DLC, has 26. 10 more bosses, and I would argue that Dark Souls is a bigger game, but it took me just as long to beat Demon Souls, simply because Demon Souls just wastes your time fighting low tier enemies on runbacks. It fucking sucks. But in Dark Souls, they gave the player the freedom to be able to run by enemies if they so chose, and that was a huge improvement and corrected the number one thing that I despised in Demon Souls. I also mentioned how I love the interconnected world of Sekiro and how Dark Souls has such an intricate map that doubles back on itself, allowing players to explore places they really shouldn't be yet. I love when games do this. I think it's great when games allow you to go almost wherever, but the player can quickly recognize when they're underleveled and shouldn't be there. It's awesome. I happened onto places throughout my run where I was like, nope, I'll come back later. And the environmental design of the levels is so freaking good. Sen's Fortress was cool as hell, and Orlando with its giant cathedrals is just beautiful. The catacombs, I freaking hated to be honest, and bone wheels can rot in hell. I hated how much of a maze that place is, but I can't deny that it's a well-designed area with a distinct vibe. Every area you go to has a distinct vibe. Blighttown is this game's version of the Valley of Defilement, but it's much less obnoxious. The place was a cakewalk compared to my experience in Demon Souls, but again, the vibe of it is immaculate. Just a depressing place full of creepy enemies and annoying bugs. A poison swamp. Everything about it is designed to make you feel uneasy. It's a depressing place, as are the depths. Then you have the demon ruins, which are like hell, and then you find Lost Izalith, and need a ring that allows you to walk on lava. You have the Darkroot Garden and Basin where you fight literal trees. Again, the enemy variety is just top tier, and the enemies always match the environmental design perfectly. There are also a variety of NPCs and vendors throughout the worlds, and again, I just really loved the creativity with them. You have the giant snake dude, a big cat, a mushroom lady, some more standard human NPCs, this creepy old dead lady. They all just really added to the world building in the game, and I enjoyed each one that I came across. Goff in the DLC who shoots the dragon down is also cool as shit. Speaking of the NPCs, I think they're there to help guide the story along, but I will be completely honest, I never have a clue what is going on in FromSoft games from a story perspective. I did watch some lore videos after I beat Sekiro, and it was really interesting, and I'm sure there's lots of cool lore in this game as well, but I have no idea about it. I am not someone who typically cares much about the story in games, especially games like this, so I had no clue what was happening, but I didn't really care. So the world design and the enemies you fight within it are amazing, and you can fight them in a near infinite variety of ways with all the ways that you can build craft. You can make a spellcasting character if you want and wield the power of magic. You could be quick and agile by building into dexterity, or you can be a brute like me and build into strength and vitality and just beat the shit out of everything with a big sword. The build crafting is super deep in this game, and I honestly didn't delve too far into it, but I gotta give props to From Software for allowing you to play in such a wide variety of ways. And finally, we have the boss fights. Again, I had heard so much about the difficulty of Souls games, so I was a little let down here just in terms of the difficulty of the bosses, but the vibe of the bosses is awesome. I honestly think every single boss fight was memorable. They all have such unique mechanics, and the design of the boss often fits with where you're fighting it. Gravelord Nito is a giant mass of skeletons who spawn skeletons. The bell gargoyles ambushing you on the roof of the cathedral. God damn, that was such a fun fight. The music, the atmosphere, the two bosses that play off each other. These bosses are a lesson in positioning as much as anything else. Again, I had heard how hard these games were, but I didn't find most fights to be all that challenging. But they were all very well designed. Ornstein and Smo was such an epic fight. One is a hulking brute, and another a shifty spear wielder that can close ground in an instant. It really forces you to rotate around the boss arena and use the environment to your advantage. Isolating a single boss was paramount for you to be able to take them down. Then you have a boss like the Ceaseless Discharge, which just forces you to get good at dodge rolling. I actually first tried Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, on my first attempt because someone left a message that said to parry him. Parrying is not something you do in the game a lot, so that message certainly helped me. It made the final boss extremely underwhelming because I beat him so easily, but I also respect that it had a design that forced you to get good at a certain element of the game. Again, some of it was position, some of it was rolling, this boss was parrying. The DLC bosses were far and away the best, as Artorias took me a dozen attempts to best, and he was a really fun fight with a cool moveset. And then Manus took me over an hour. 23 attempts in total, by far the most I had on any boss. There were a couple times that I got hit and it was kind of bullshit in my opinion, but overall I thought the fight was great and I loved how it forced me to learn his moveset to overcome him. Black Dragon Calamite I beat on my second attempt just because I pretty much blocked through the whole thing. It wasn't a very skillful fight by me, but I appreciated how some bosses you could just sort of brute force. On that topic, outside of getting comboed by Manus or Artorias, an underrated thing that I noticed about the boss fights is they're extremely fair. They are often a war of attrition more than anything. They all have heal windows. It's not like you're just getting cheaply one-shotted, something that I sort of assumed was the case when you hear people talk about how hard these games are. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In some of my boss clears, Artorias especially, I had backed off numerous times to heal. I started off terribly in that fight, getting like no damage in and taking many hits. I had other fights where I had done half his damage by the time I finally did 1 ounce of damage to him in the fight that I actually beat him on. But I just healed and stuck with it. You have to get your licks in where you can, but sometimes those windows are extremely tight. But I love that you can have a back and forth. One-shots are never fun in any game as there's literally no counterplay. But in Dark Souls, you have ample opportunity to get back in the fight if you're careful, and I appreciated the hell out of that. I also loved dying a few times when the boss was damn near one-shot. This happened to me with Owlfather and Sekiro, and then it took me over an hour to best him after that, after being within one shot of killing him. I love when a fight is close to the bitter end, that you have to stay on your game and you can't let your guard down even when the boss is almost dead. Sure, it's heartbreaking sometimes, but I love that every move matters. Additionally, I also love the Estus flask in this game. I beat the final boss of Demon Souls on my first attempt, but I was able to just heal constantly through the fight because I had so much grass by the end of the game. Conversely, I got absolutely fucked in the early game of Demon Souls because I was very low on grass, so it actually deterred me from being able to go explore new places, where with a replenishing flask, the game can be much more balanced. You can't just infinitely heal through an entire fight like I could on Demon Souls' final boss, but on the flip side, you also have heals for whatever area you're exploring. Every bonfire will replenish your stash, and you can upgrade the bonfires to give you more if you're in a particularly challenging area, which is another thing that I greatly appreciated. Where in Demon Souls, I had to waste a bunch of time just farming grass. I also had to farm levels in the game because I misallocated some stats early on and I couldn't overcome it due to the lack of healing options. Again, so much of Demon Souls was just a giant waste of time, where in this game, the balance was so much better. I never had to farm souls once in my playthrough. In fact, once I got the Black Knight sword, I finally had a weapon worth upgrading, and when I did that, I felt like I was overpowered for a lot of my encounters. I fought Grey Wolf Sif and annihilated him, which was a bit of a shame as that boss is so damn cool. A giant wolf wielding a sword, that's sick as hell. I would have loved to have to go a few attempts to learn its moveset better, but alas, I destroyed him first try. But an awesome boss nonetheless. Even the more gimmicky bosses like Moonlight Butterfly were quite cool. The only boss that I did not enjoy was Bed of Chaos. Honestly, such a dumb fight. I did not like that one at all. and Seat the Scaleless, I also kind of brute forced for better or worse. I would have liked to know how you're actually supposed to fight that boss, but again, I kind of just brute forced my way through it. All that being said though, I love that the game gives you options. Sure, I would have loved for every fight to be a chess match and for me to have to learn the boss's movesets in and out. But if I really care, I can just go do that on an underleveled challenge run where I'll be forced to play perfect. Conversely, it's awesome that you can level yourself up to be strong as hell and overpower some bosses. It gives less skilled players a means of overcoming a boss that may be too challenging otherwise. Again, player choice is crucial. Dark Souls came out in 2011, so it's 15 years old at this point, and some of the controls definitely reflect that. Jumping is not actually a button, but rather when sprinting, you then press sprint again. This caused me to leap to my death a few times, which was definitely a bit annoying. I would also run into some camera jank here and there, but nothing on the same level that had occurred in Demon's Souls. Sometimes the physics would also kill me due to jankiness, which is annoying, but you can look past it when the game is this good. In something like Demon's Souls, the jank was annoying to deal with because the surrounding game was so tedious. In Dark Souls, the rest of the game is so damn good that the little jank actually just becomes charming, a reminder of a bygone era before gaming was as polished as it is now. It honestly shocks me it took me 15 years to play this masterpiece. It's a game that stands the test of time, and though it won't be anytime soon, I am already looking forward to a repeat playthrough, armed with the knowledge that I now have of the game's systems. It's such a satisfying game to play. I didn't harp on it enough in this review, but the music is awesome in many of the boss fights, and again, it's one of the best games I've ever played from a level design perspective. The distinctiveness of each biome you go to was so carefully thought out and crafted. Again, they all have a vibe, a mood, a tone that perfectly suits the environment. It's absolutely S tier, some of the best level design I've ever seen in any video game. I just wanted to highlight it one more time before wrapping the review up because it honestly deserves all the praise. I adore the world that From Software built here, even if some of it is intentionally designed to frustrate the player. But overcoming that design is also what makes the game so satisfying to play. Anyways, that's it for the video. I'm honestly relieved that I love Dark Souls so much, as I promised myself that I'd play all the games, but after Demon's Souls, I was sad that I might just be wasting my time playing games that I don't enjoy. Turns out, I just think Demon's Souls has a lot of flaws, but Dark Souls mitigates basically every one of those issues, so I'm immensely excited to experience Dark Souls 2 and 3. If they are on par with Dark Souls 1, then I'm in for some fun-ass gaming. But that's it for the video. Let me know your thoughts on Dark Souls down below. I would love to hear them. I think this game is just wonderful. Like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more. Follow me on Twitch at ItSizzle7 to watch my other Souls playthroughs and join the community Discord for gaming discussions. There's links to all that in the description below. Lastly, if you're still here, thanks so much for watching to the end. It means a lot. Take care.